Today I'm going to go through what you need to know when it comes to stock option, giving shares, giving options, when you want to do acquisition, roll-ups, and whatnot. My name is Moran Pober. I'm the founder and CEO of acquisitions.com. We're the largest community of M&A entrepreneurs and investors and people who want to do roll-ups. And we're also looking to invest in companies and people who want to do acquisitions and roll-ups. We're involved in 100 plus transactions over the last 3 years and now looking to just partner and invest in great deals. So stock options, what it looks like. What do you need to know when it comes to stock options, giving options? When you do acquisitions, when you want to start acquisitions, or even when you're starting a business from scratch, a lot of founders are giving options or stocks or shares, whatever way that you heard it before, for first executives or employees or people who are basically important to the path that you want to go through, right? So because obviously it's very difficult to be successful in business on your own, right? So if you don't know anything, it's always good to bring people around you, people who've been there, done that. If it's, if you want to do acquisitions, if it's people who can help you with deal flow, with negotiations, with capital, with legal stuff, with finance stuff, right? With operations. So a lot of those things. And obviously then when you want to operate the business, you need to think, okay, who's going to operate the business? It's going to be you. You're going to be the CEO. Perhaps you need a COO. You need a marketing guy, sales guy, operations, finance, HR, compliance. So you need a lot of people in your team in order to be able to grow a big business. And you can do that over time, of course. And obviously, as you grow and have more cash flow, you can just bring in people and pay them great salary. Or you can attract people before that with options and equity and whatnot, with the promise that one day it'll be a big company. And that big company will be worth so much that the shares that employer executive got today will be worth 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times more in 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now. And that's basically the promise of going out there and providing and giving shares to executives and also for employees who are starting with you early, or maybe any employee. When you see the biggest companies out there like Google, Facebook, basically every big company that you think about it is public, there's usually a very common practice to give about 10-20% to the employees, right? With options and potential shares in your business to incentivize them to stay in the business. Because the last thing you want are employees or executives or key members in your company that you've been training for a while, they know everything about the business and they might leave you soon, right? The last thing you want is something like that to happen. And having equity, having shares, having ESOP, which is basically employee stock option agreement, is an opportunity for you to incentivize them to stay with you and not leave. And I'll walk you through kind of like what that looks like. There's basically a very common idea of vesting those shares. So if someone is coming to you, they're not right away getting access to those shares. They're being vested over time, which means basically it's all based on the negotiation and the agreement. But very common, for example, is to do vested schedule for 4 years. So for example, if there's 1 point that you give someone or whatever, something, 50% of the business, it doesn't matter. You can basically decide that, okay, I'm going to invest those shares on a yearly basis for that person to actually get access to those shares. So that's a great way to incentivize and bring people to your team, assuming that you don't have access to a lot of cash flow, right? So because some people will be willing to work with you for less cash flow potentially if you show them that there's an upside and you can give them shares and whatnot. So for example, I know, with us, with our services, we could charge 10 times more, but because we have a lot of partnership opportunities, then we're open to the idea of charging less, showing and providing values faster, and then over time basically earning our equity in the business while we're helping. So basically we work for the entrepreneur, we work for the CEO, and earning our equity in their businesses with the value that we provide. I think it's a very fair exchange, and so are employees or executives that you bring. If you have a large enough vision, you know how to sell your vision, you have good enough story of what you're trying to create, and it's obviously reasonable, and you can back it up with actions, then it can be very, very exciting for people to come to work with you. The beauty with those shares, if you look at some of the biggest companies out there, like again, Facebook, Google, imagine if you were able to access shares of those companies when they just started, right? There's a guy by the name of Chamath Palihapitiya that I like and follow every now and then. So he basically became a billionaire by being one of the first employees in Facebook. So he basically had stock option in Facebook, and because Facebook grew so much and the value of his shares grew so much, he became a billionaire, right? Started as an employee. So it's just showing you that you don't necessarily need to be the main guy in a business to become a billionaire. Steve Ballmer for Microsoft, also same kind of story, became a billionaire from working in the company and just getting access to stock option and whatnot. Also, a lot of CEOs are actually getting incentivized with stock options. So if you're looking at someone like Elon Musk, he became the richest right now, not really the richest, he's fighting with Jeff Bezos, right? But he became one of the richest people in the world by having an incentive to grow Tesla. So basically, he had such bonuses. So every time Tesla reached a specific milestone, he's receiving an extra bonus of shares. And I remember when Elon Musk received the compensation plan for his role as a CEO a few years ago, I remember people laughed at him. Like, you can see interviews on CNBC and whatnot, people literally laughing at him saying, why would anyone do such a compensation plan? What do you think? You're going to be one of the biggest car companies in the world, or one of the biggest companies in the world? Like, if you would be able to get Tesla to that point, Elon Musk would be one of the richest, if not the richest person in the world. Like, that's what they're saying there in CNBC. And who's laughing in the end of the day, right? But the reason that something like that could happen, basically having an access to a lottery ticket, obviously he had to work very hard, and every employee that grew with a company that's growing so fast, I mean, it's pretty much a lottery ticket. But that's the way to grow, because the business is growing because of people. People grow businesses, right? As the CEO, you need to grow the people, and the people will grow your business. So you need to find ways to incentivize them, and having stock options, having shares in the business, first of all, will make everyone aligned, will make everyone feel like they're part of something bigger. And when everyone feel like they're actually partners, because they are partners, because they own shares, and obviously everyone owns shares based on their relative value that they bring to the business. But when everyone owns share in the business, that's the beauty. That's how everyone work together. Now, you might say, when it's the right time to do that, that's a whole different story. But here's the thing, with a company that is planning to go public, it's very common to do that, even if not right away. Eventually, you can see a lot of owners and CEOs diluting their shares to allow employees to own some of those shares in the business, to incentivize them and to make sure that everyone feels like they're in this together. Another thing you see a lot is that when investors are involved in a business, when you have investors, sophisticated investors like a private equity firm or venture capital firms, usually after they invest in companies, their shares won't be diluted. So they have a certain type of share that will basically mean that whatever they invested won't be diluted. And if there's a dilution towards stock options to the employees, then only the founder's shares are being diluted. It's a very common practice with businesses that are growing fast and raising capital from financial institutions. Another thing you probably want to know about is the exercise window, which basically means that when you leave the company or getting fired, it doesn't really affect your shares that vested, right? Obviously, so like I said, if you have an agreement that your shares are being vested over time, so let's say they agreed to pay you 1% of the company, 0.25 is being vested each year, and you're actually getting access to those shares. So when you leave, then you have an exercise window to basically pay the company to get those shares, because so far what you got is usually options. You didn't get an actual share in the business. You got options to buy at existing price. So let's say the business just started and you got shares for $1. Hopefully within 3, 5, 10 years when you're about to leave, or let's say 4 years, because that's the vested period, let's say it's worth 10 times or $100 per share, then guess what? You basically did 10x or 100x, but you can buy those options for $1 still because you had the option at that phase. Then you have an exercise period, an exercise window to basically pay the company for your options. And there was a lot of misconceptions about that in the world on what's the right way to do that, because especially if it's an employee in a business, a lot of them just didn't have the money to buy those shares from the business. It's not like those are liquid shares many times when we're talking about private companies. So it created a bit of a drama and whatnot. A lot of executives also used to get loans from the company to get that, to allow themselves better tax treatment. So there's a lot of nuances when it comes to shares, options, ESOPs. And I think it's very, very smart for you to understand what is the process and just have good fundamentals of understanding who you need to give shares, when you need to give shares, what's the exercise window should look like. And there's a lot of basically nuances that you can agree on. Obviously, there's a class of shares that you can give someone, right? So investors usually get different class of shares versus the founder even, or employees, right? Who have voting, power. That's a lot of things that will basically be dependent based on the type of share That's someone owning a business. That's how you see a lot of CEOs like Zuckerberg or Bezos, or basically a lot of companies out there that are public tech companies doing that a lot. That's how you see companies, founders like Mark Zuckerberg that owns like 16% in the business, but his power is up to 60% because each share that Zuckerberg owns is very different than a random share that an employee or a retail investor owns. It's usually those super voting shares have at least 10 or 20 votes more than a normal share. So it's a fascinating world that I think can get a bit overwhelming if you never heard about those things. But I think as you grow a business, as you do a roll up and buy businesses, I think it's smart to understand some of those nuances. Anyway, hope it opened your eyes to this world of shares, options, and all that. Let me know in the comments below what do you think. If you have questions or if there are any other topics you want me to talk about. If you didn't yet, like, subscribe, and all that, I'll really appreciate that. And I'll see you soon.